Most people don't wake up one day and decide to ruin their lives. It happens quietly, one habit at a time, one ignored responsibility at a time, one postponed decision at a time. And the most dangerous part is this: nothing feels wrong at first. Life still moves on. You still breathe, still work, still smile. But deep inside, there's a subtle awareness that you are not becoming who you once believed you could be. At some point, you realize that the problem isn't a lack of opportunity, intelligence, or potential. The problem is that somewhere along the way, you stopped building yourself with intention. You started reacting instead of directing. Days began to happen to you instead of being shaped by you. And without realizing it, you allowed drift to replace design. This is not a message about guilt. It is a message about awakening. Because the same quiet process that breaks a life down can be reversed. Just as habits dismantle a future, habits can rebuild it. Just as neglect shapes limitation, discipline shapes possibility. The question is not whether your life can change. The question is whether you are willing to take responsibility for reconstructing it, piece by piece, choice by choice, starting today. Personal responsibility is the moment a person stops negotiating with reality and starts working with it. It is the understanding that regardless of where you started, what you were given, or what happened to you, the direction your life takes from this point forward is largely determined by your own decisions. This idea is not about guilt or self-criticism. It is about power. The moment you say, "This is my life and I am responsible for it," you move from being a victim of circumstances to being an active participant in your future. Many people delay growth because they hand over control to external factors. They wait for the economy to improve, for the right opportunity to appear, for someone to notice their potential, or for motivation to magically arrive. While these factors exist and do influence outcomes, they are not reliable foundations for progress. Depending on them keeps a person reactive rather than proactive. Personal responsibility flips that dynamic. It shifts the focus from what is happening outside to what can be done inside your thinking, your habits, and your daily choices. Taking responsibility requires honesty. It means recognizing that results, whether good or bad, are signals. If someone is unhappy with their finances, health, relationships, or personal growth, those areas are mirrors reflecting past decisions and behaviors. This can be uncomfortable because it removes excuses, but it is also liberating. Once you see that choices created the current situation, it becomes clear that different choices can create a different future. Responsibility does not mean denying hardship. It means refusing to let hardship become a permanent excuse. This mindset also demands maturity. It is easy to complain, justify, and explain away shortcomings. It is harder to pause and ask, what part did I play in this? That question is not meant to punish, but to clarify. When a person accepts their role, they gain insight into what needs to change. Growth rarely begins with inspiration. It begins with accountability. Without accountability, even the best advice and the strongest motivation fade quickly. Personal responsibility also changes how time is used. Instead of waiting, people who accept responsibility act. They read when others scroll, practice when others procrastinate, and prepare while others hope. They understand that life rewards effort before it rewards outcomes. This attitude builds momentum because small actions taken consistently reinforce self-trust. Every responsible choice, no matter how minor, sends a message to the mind: I can rely on myself. Over time, this self-trust becomes confidence, and confidence fuels further action. Another important aspect of responsibility is emotional ownership. Blaming others for emotional states gives them control. When someone believes that their mood, confidence, or self-worth depends entirely on circumstances or people, they remain fragile. Responsibility teaches emotional discipline, the ability to choose responses instead of reacting automatically. This does not mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding them without allowing them to dictate behavior. Rebuilding yourself always begins here, because no strategy works without ownership. Goals, plans, and affirmations collapse if responsibility is missing. When responsibility is present, even imperfect plans move forward. A person who takes responsibility does not wait to feel ready. They become ready through action. They stop asking who is at fault and start asking what is required. They replace entitlement with effort and excuses with execution. This internal shift quietly restructures identity because over time, you do not just act responsibly, you begin to see yourself as someone who does. And that identity influences every decision that follows, shaping how challenges are approached, how setbacks are handled, how discipline is practiced, and how progress slowly but inevitably unfolds through intentional choices made day after day. Self-awareness is the starting point of all meaningful change because you cannot improve what you do not understand. Many people rush towards self-improvement strategies, new habits, new routines, new goals without first examining the person who is supposed to carry them out. This often leads to frustration because the surface changes never address the deeper patterns operating underneath. Self-awareness asks you to slow down and look inward before you attempt to move forward, not to judge yourself harshly, but to see yourself clearly. At its core, self-awareness is the ability to observe your own thoughts, behaviors, emotions, and reactions without immediately defending or justifying them. It is noticing how you respond under pressure, what triggers your discouragement, what fuels your motivation, and what consistently derails your progress. Most people live on autopilot, repeating familiar patterns simply because they feel normal. Self-awareness interrupts that cycle by making the unconscious conscious. Once a pattern is visible, it can be questioned. Once it is questioned, it can be changed. Honest self-assessment requires courage. It is far easier to focus on what others should fix than to confront personal weaknesses. Yet real growth begins when you acknowledge gaps between who you are and who you want to become. This includes recognizing limiting beliefs, ineffective habits, and emotional reactions that no longer serve you. Awareness does not mean labeling yourself as flawed or broken. It means recognizing that you are unfinished. That realization, when handled correctly, becomes a source of energy rather than shame. Self-awareness also clarifies strengths, which is equally important. Many people underestimate their abilities because they have never taken the time to identify what they do well. Understanding your strengths allows you to build from solid ground instead of constantly trying to compensate for weaknesses. When you know where you are effective, you can design your life in a way that aligns with your natural capabilities, increasing both confidence and consistency. Improvement becomes more strategic and less exhausting. Another key element of self-awareness is understanding motives. People often pursue goals without examining why they want them. When motivations are unclear or borrowed from external expectations, effort becomes fragile. Self-awareness brings alignment between values and action. It helps you distinguish between what genuinely matters to you and what you have been conditioned to chase. When actions align with values, discipline feels purposeful rather than forced, and setbacks become lessons rather than reasons to quit. Self-awareness also sharpens. Decision discipline is the quiet force that shapes results long after motivation fades. Motivation is emotional. It rises and falls based on mood, circumstances, and external influence. Discipline, on the other hand, is a decision repeated daily, regardless of how one feels. People often wait to feel inspired before they act, but those who rebuild themselves understand a crucial truth. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. Discipline moves first, and motivation follows later, if it comes at all. Relying on motivation is unreliable because emotions are unstable. Some days you feel energized, focused, and confident. Other days you feel tired, distracted, or discouraged. If progress depends on feeling good, progress will be inconsistent. Discipline removes emotion from the equation. It says, this is what I do, not this is what I feel like doing. That shift alone separates those who make steady progress from those who remain stuck in cycles of starting and stopping. Discipline is not about harshness or punishment. It is about structure. It is choosing order over chaos and long-term benefit over short-term comfort. Every meaningful area of life responds to discipline. Health improves through consistent habits. not bursts of enthusiasm. Skills develop through practice, not excitement. Financial stability grows through regular, controlled decisions, not emotional spending or sudden ambition. Discipline creates stability, and stability creates growth. One of the reasons discipline feels difficult is because it often requires doing small, unglamorous things repeatedly. There is nothing exciting about reading 10 pages a day, waking up early, practicing a skill alone, or saying no to distractions. Yet these small acts, when done consistently, compound into extraordinary outcomes. Discipline understands the power of accumulation. It trusts the process even when results are not immediately visible. Another important aspect of discipline is identity. When you act with discipline repeatedly, you begin to see yourself differently. You stop identifying as someone who tries and start identifying as someone who does. This identity shift is powerful because behavior tends to align with self-image. A disciplined person does not constantly debate whether to act. Action becomes automatic. Over time, discipline reduces internal resistance because the habit of showing up replaces the struggle of decision-making. Discipline also protects you from excuses. Excuses thrive in emotional states, especially fear, doubt, and fatigue. Discipline bypasses these states by focusing on commitment rather than comfort. It does not ask whether conditions are perfect. It asks whether the task is necessary. This mindset builds resilience because progress continues even during difficult periods. In fact, discipline is most valuable when circumstances are unfavorable, because that is when motivation is weakest and excuses are loudest. It is important to understand that discipline does not eliminate rest or enjoyment. Instead, it creates boundaries that make both possible without guilt. A disciplined person rests intentionally and works intentionally. Without discipline, rest turns into avoidance and work turns into stress. Discipline brings balance by assigning time and effort purposefully, allowing life to feel more controlled rather than overwhelming. Many people believe discipline limits freedom, but the opposite is true. Discipline creates freedom by reducing chaos and increasing capability. When you control your actions, you are no longer controlled by impulse, distraction, or external pressure. This sense of control builds confidence because you know you can rely on yourself even when things are difficult. That self-reliance becomes a foundation for growth, leadership, and personal strength. Rebuilding yourself requires discipline because transformation is not a single decision. It is a series of choices made repeatedly. Motivation may spark the desire to change, but discipline carries that desire through boredom, resistance, and delay. It is the bridge between intention and result, the force that turns ideas into habits and habits into character, shaping daily behavior until effort becomes routine and progress becomes inevitable through consistent, deliberate action performed. Whether enthusiasm is present or not, goals give direction, but habits determine direction's outcome. Many people become fixated on what they want to achieve while ignoring how they live each day. They set ambitious targets, visualize success, and talk about the future, yet their daily routines remain unchanged. This creates a gap between desire and reality. Rebuilding yourself requires closing that gap, and the most reliable way to do that is by upgrading habits rather than obsessing over goals. Goals are often distant and abstract. They exist in the future and depend on many variables. Habits exist in the present and are fully within personal control. A goal might be to become healthier, more skilled, or more successful, but habits determine whether that goal is supported or sabotaged. When habits are misaligned with goals, frustration grows. When habits support goals, progress becomes natural. This is why sustainable change is rooted in what you do daily, not in what you hope to accomplish someday. Habits are powerful because they shape behavior without requiring constant willpower. Once a habit is established, it runs automatically, conserving mental energy. This can work for or against you. Poor habits quietly drain time, focus, and potential, often without immediate consequences. Good habits quietly build strength, knowledge, and confidence in the same subtle way. Over time, both types of habits compound, producing results that seem sudden but are actually the product of repeated behavior. Upgrading habits requires awareness and intentional replacement. Removing a habit without replacing it leaves a vacuum, and vacuums tend to fill themselves with familiar patterns. Lasting change happens when an unproductive habit is swapped for a constructive one that serves the same need. This process is practical rather than dramatic. It focuses on consistency rather than intensity. Small habit changes may feel insignificant in the moment, but they reshape daily experience, which ultimately reshapes identity. And another important aspect of habits is that they are identity-based. Repeated actions send signals to the mind about who you are. If you consistently show up to learn, to practice, to prepare, you begin to see yourself as a disciplined and capable person. If you consistently avoid effort, you reinforce an identity of hesitation. Habits do not just produce outcomes, they produce self-image. This self-image then influences future behavior, creating a loop that either accelerates growth or reinforces stagnation. Goals can sometimes be discouraging because progress toward them is not always visible. Habits provide immediate feedback. Each completed habit is a small win that builds momentum. Momentum matters because it reduces resistance. When you experience yourself keeping commitments, even small ones, confidence grows. This confidence fuels further action. In contrast, repeatedly setting goals without changing habits erodes trust in yourself, making future attempts harder. Habits also create structure, which reduces reliance on motivation. When actions are scheduled and routine, they require less emotional energy. This is especially important during difficult periods when enthusiasm is low. Habits keep you moving forward, even when circumstances are not ideal. They turn effort into routine and reduce the need for constant decision-making, freeing mental space for creativity and problem-solving. Rebuilding yourself is not about becoming someone else overnight. It is about becoming slightly better through daily practice. Goals may inspire the direction of change, but habits determine the speed, sustainability of that change. A person who improves their habits improves their life quietly, steadily, and permanently. Over time, upgraded habits make improved results feel natural rather than forced, because success stops being a destination and becomes a byproduct of how life is lived each day through intentional, repeated actions that align behavior with desired growth and personal standards. Continuous learning is the engine that keeps personal growth alive. The moment learning stops, progress slows, even if external activity remains high. Many people assume that once formal education ends, learning becomes optional, but life does not reward what you once knew. It rewards what you are currently able to do and understand. Rebuilding yourself requires adopting the mindset that development is never complete, and that every season of life demands new knowledge, new skills, and new perspectives. Learning expands awareness. It allows you to see options where before there were none. Without learning, people rely on outdated ideas and habits, often repeating the same mistakes while expecting different results. Learning introduces new frameworks for thinking, helping you question assumptions that may have quietly limited your growth. This is especially important during periods of transition or difficulty. When old strategies no longer produce results, learning becomes a way to adapt rather than resist change. One of the most powerful aspects of continuous learning is that it compounds internally. Knowledge builds upon itself. Each idea strengthens the ability to understand the next one. Over time, this creates depth of insight rather than scattered information. This depth improves decision-making because you begin to recognize patterns, anticipate consequences, and respond thoughtfully instead of impulsively. Learning sharpens judgment, and sound judgment improves every area of life. Continuous learning also fosters humility. When you commit to learning, you acknowledge that you do not have all the answers. This humility keeps the mind open and flexible. It prevents stagnation and arrogance, both of which limit growth. A learner approaches life with curiosity rather than defensiveness, seeing challenges as opportunities to understand rather than threats to ego. This attitude reduces fear of failure because mistakes become sources of information rather than evidence of inadequacy. Learning is not limited to books or formal instruction. It occurs through observation, reflection, and experience. Paying attention to outcomes, asking thoughtful questions, and reviewing decisions are all forms of learning. When you extract lessons from both success and failure, life itself becomes a classroom. This approach turns everyday experiences into tools for improvement, ensuring that growth continues even during routine or difficult periods. Another important benefit of learning is adaptability. The world changes rapidly, and skills that were once valuable can become obsolete. Continuous learning allows you to adjust rather than fall behind. It keeps you relevant, capable, and resilient. This adaptability is especially important when rebuilding yourself, because rebuilding often involves stepping into unfamiliar territory. Learning reduces uncertainty by increasing competence. Learning also strengthens confidence, but not the fragile kind that depends on external validation. It builds quiet confidence rooted in preparation. When you know you have invested time in understanding, practicing, and improving, you trust your ability to handle challenges. This trust reduces anxiety and increases willingness to take initiative. Confidence born from learning encourages action rather than hesitation. A commitment to learning also influences environment and behavior. Learners seek better conversations, better information, and better standards. They become selective about what they consume mentally, understanding that inputs shape thinking. This selectivity improves focus and clarity over time. Learning becomes a habit rather than an effort, woven naturally into daily life. Rebuilding yourself through continuous learning means treating growth as a lifelong project rather than a temporary phase. It means understanding that improvement is not about reaching a final version of yourself, but about staying in motion. Learning keeps that motion alive, ensuring that progress does not depend on external circumstances, but on an internal commitment to understanding, developing, and refining oneself through consistent exposure to new ideas, reflection on experience, and the steady expansion of capability that allows life to improve from the inside out through deliberate intellectual and personal engagement. With each stage of the journey, environment plays a powerful and often underestimated role in shaping who a person becomes. While individuals like to believe that willpower alone determines success or failure, daily surroundings quietly influence thoughts, emotions, and behavior. Rebuilding yourself requires recognizing that growth does not happen in isolation. The people you spend time with, the information you consume, and the standards you tolerate all leave impressions that accumulate over time, gradually shaping identity and direction. Every environment sends messages. Conversations reinforce beliefs. Media reinforces attitudes. Physical spaces reinforce habits. When these messages align with growth, progress feels supported. When they conflict with growth, progress feels like a constant uphill struggle. This is why two people with similar ability can experience vastly different outcomes depending on their surroundings. Environment does not eliminate personal responsibility, but it can either support discipline or constantly challenge it. Social environment is especially influential. People absorb the attitudes, language, and expectations of those they interact with most. If negativity, complacency, or excuses dominate, those interactions, those patterns begin to feel normal. On the other hand, being around individuals who value effort, learning, and accountability raises standards without force. Expectations shift subtly. Behaviors that once felt difficult begin to feel reasonable. This is not about copying others blindly. It is about exposure. What feels normal sets the baseline for behavior. Information environment matters just as much. What you read, watch, and listen to repeatedly shapes your thinking. Constant exposure to distraction, outrage, or trivial content fragments attention and lowers tolerance for effort. In contrast, exposure to thoughtful ideas, constructive dialogue, and educational material sharpens focus and raises awareness. Over time, the mind becomes conditioned to the quality of its inputs. Rebuilding yourself requires intentional selection of mental nutrition, understanding that thoughts are influenced by what they are fed. Physical environment also affects behavior. Cluttered spaces encourage distraction. Organized spaces encourage clarity. A space designed for productivity reduces friction, making it easier to act on good intentions. This does not require perfection or luxury, but it does require intention. Small adjustments, such as reducing distractions or arranging tools for easy access, can significantly improve consistency. Environment either adds resistance or removes it. Another overlooked aspect of environment is what you tolerate. Tolerance sets standards. When you tolerate poor behavior, unhealthy habits, or unproductive routines, you silently accept them as acceptable. Over time, tolerance becomes permission. Rebuilding yourself involves raising personal standards and enforcing them through action. This may require uncomfortable decisions, such as limiting exposure to certain influences or setting boundaries that were previously avoided. While these choices can feel difficult at first, they protect growth. Environment also influences emotional states. Certain surroundings trigger stress, doubt, or impulsive behavior. Others promote calm, focus, and reflection. Being aware of these effects allows you to design conditions that support the person you are becoming. Emotional discipline becomes easier when the environment supports clarity rather than chaos. Rebuilding yourself does not mean escaping the world. It means shaping your relationship with it. You may not control everything around you, but you can control what you allow close to you. Each choice regarding environment is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. Over time, these choices accumulate, making growth feel less like a constant battle and more like a natural response to supportive conditions. When environment aligns with intention, effort multiplies, habits strengthen, and identity evolves through daily exposure to standards, influences, and conditions that reinforce purposeful behavior, enabling steady progress through alignment between surroundings and personal development goals without reliance on force or constant self-control. As this message comes to a close, remember that rebuilding yourself is not a single decision made in a moment of inspiration, but a lifelong commitment made in ordinary moments. It is the choice to take responsibility when excuses feel easier, to practice discipline when motivation is absent, to improve habits instead of merely wishing for better results, to keep learning when comfort tempts you to stop, and to shape your environment so it supports the person you are becoming. Progress may feel slow at times, but slow progress is still progress, and consistency will always outperform intensity in the long run. You are not required to be perfect. You are only required to be intentional. Every small, correct choice strengthens character, sharpens direction, and rebuilds confidence. Over time, these choices transform not just circumstances, but identity. When you commit to rebuilding yourself, you are deciding to live deliberately rather than accidentally, to grow rather than drift, and to become a cause rather than an effect in your own life. Good luck on your journey of growth and self-rebuilding. Thank you for your time, your attention, and the opportunity to share this message with you.